Ready?
Yes, we're ready. We're live.
Oh, we're live.
We
Good
are,
job.
we are, we are live. Folks, welcome to Talking Crit. I am one of your hosts, Eric Tenkar, your bartender in the OSR. With me, stage, whatever it is, right, left, is none other than my once a week work spouse, bad Mike Battalato.
Yeah.
And holding us up, jeez, and
I am the
holding
Atlas
us,
of Talking Crit.
yes, and holding us up from the bottom, none other than Jim Kitchen,
What's going
the
on?
one, the only.
I want to throw something out real quick at the beginning, and that's all we'll talk about is that we had North Texas had game registration last night. It went absolutely beautifully, no problems. We're not a big con like Gary Con or Game Hole or one of those, and we use tabletop events and nary a hitch. Went off with nary a hitch. Thanks, Gary. Thanks to everybody. I mean, not everybody got the games they wanted, obviously, sadly, but yes, we it went without a hitch. It's much different than the old days when we used to have all kinds of things go on. Tabletop event is up, they upped their server game, they've upped their sign up game, and we're
Oh,
just that right. We only got 500 people, so we're not.
Mike, the registration used to be at 1 o'clock in the morning Eastern time.
Yep. Yeah, Doug liked it to open at 12:01 a.m. and it was a nightmare. So
Tell me.
Yeah, so it's now it's at 7 p.m. Central, and yeah, like we had a bunch of kudos and thanks to Gary. Gary helped everything. People that accidentally registered twice in the same spot, because that's not our fault. That's tabletop events.
Yep, and it is possible. It's happened to me with other things.
Yeah, tabletop events will do that. We'll let you register for 2 games at the same time. By the way, that's been going back since Doug was still with us. He argued with him about that. And he was told that nobody will do that. Nobody will ever register for games at the same time. We don't need any kind of, programming that protects people from that. So yeah, that's always been an issue. But yeah, so thanks to everybody, and it's going to be a great call. There's still open spaces. By the way, we had 2 of our special guests, James Raggy and Kelsey Dion, entered their games in yesterday. So all their games were wide open. Every game they had was wide open, which is awesome. There was no pre-sales on their tickets, which sucks for us because we would have made money off the pre-sales tickets. But that was awesome. So all their games were up, and I think they all sold out, all James's games and all Kelsey's games. So that's great. Gary can correct me if I'm wrong, but and I also was told something by Gary that I'll let you guys know is that we're the only convention where Kelsey managed to register her games before sign up. Because normally for Gary Con and Game Hole, she forgets and she just says, "Oh, I'm going to have a game," and then they throw it up there. We were the only game, and now it was only 24 hours before the signups were there, but it was early. She actually did it early for our convention. And because last year she didn't do any games for our convention, we had to get her just to run some games. She just ran her games off the board. She just went there and said, "Hey, I'm going to run some games," and everybody show up or whatever. She's a busy lady, I've heard. I've just heard.
She's got a lot going on.
I don't know. I don't know what she's doing. And then, yeah, Gary confirmed they did sell out, so that's great. But no, we had a great time, and it's going to be great. Month and a half, and it's going to be fun. And thanks to Gary, and thanks to everybody, and thanks to tabletop events actually worked pretty well.
And things like last night make you really remember. Oh my God, they used to do all of this by hand with paper.
Jim, I did it the first 2 cons. We didn't use tabletop events wasn't around. People don't realize there was a world before tabletop events, and all these big companies, a lot of these, I'm sorry, not big conventions, smaller conventions, that's how we did it. That's how we did it the first 2 years. We did it by hand. And so did a lot of others. I remember I had a friend that worked at AggieCon in the early 80s, and that's how they did it. They would just have a spreadsheet, well, not a spreadsheet, just a sheet. It'd be written and all the games, and then and a guy as the people would sign up for games, because there was no email back then. People weren't sending email to sign up for games. They would write them down on their big giant sheet, and it was a different world, man. Totally different world.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. I'm glad those days are behind us. So
absolutely.
Yes.
Let's see. What do we have to talk about this week? We've got all sorts of interesting things.
We have good things. Now, Jim, you weren't there for our pre-show meeting. I laugh as I say that. As I was eating a sandwich and I don't know what Eric was doing there. We have two or three really interesting items today. So everybody probably knows that we had 3 major retirements in WotC the last week or so. And the timing's a little, I wouldn't call it suspicious. I don't know what you call it. It's interesting that we had Chris Perkins, Chris Kao, and Crawford all retire, all big linchpins of different parts of WotC, all retired last week after long service. And so, of course, all the conspiracy people are out there flipping out, absolutely freaking out. Was this a retirement? Was this you can quit or you're fired? Was this because WotC's not doing well? Was this because it's time to move on? I mean, so there's all kinds of. I'm going to ask you guys opinions. What you think, because this is all speculation. We're never going to know. They all wrote very kind and loving, send offs. Oh, I loved working at WotC. It was great, wonderful. Time for me to move on for other projects. Blah blah blah. We've heard it all before. What do you guys think? What was behind this?
I don't believe in conspiracy.
And we're speculating, by the way.
I don't believe in conspiracy theories. I think, one of them, it's very obviously linked to Sigil going away. The other two, people decide to leave for whatever reason. Sometimes new management comes in and somebody says, you know what, I've had a great run here, but I need to challenge myself and go somewhere else. Sometimes you do have personality conflicts and somebody has politely said, hit the road, but nobody in this conversation has any idea what the truth is.
No.
And nobody will ever know what the truth is. And I just think this is all hot air. And frankly, again, I don't know any of these people personally. I may have met Chris Perkins, but I don't remember it. But 30 years of Gen Cons and conventions and everything else, there's a chance. But frankly, I wish them all the best, and I don't care. I don't.
Well, you're right about Chris Kao. Once Sigil is gone, that's his job is no more, and that makes sense that he's going to leave. But Perkins and Crawford were essential parts the last 10 years.
These guys have had long careers, and no offense, but working at a game company, every year at a game company is like 7 in the real world. And it's exhausting and it's tiresome and it wears on you. And your family members say, why is your industry so rankly unprofessional and batshit crazy? And you don't have answers.
That's why Kurt Gould, after his 20 years, he went to a monastery and now he's studying to be a monk because,
and do you blame him, frankly?
No, not at all.
The scars are deep. I did have, now it's interesting because I had, we'll talk about this later on, but I have a friend who has nothing to do with role-playing games, nothing to do with miniature gaming. Like their high point is Catan, which tells you something. But they asked me a question this week that we'll talk about later in the show, but I think it's a relevant question to all of this. But I don't have any conspiracy theories. I wish them all the best. I don't know them personally. I think Perkins and Crawford could very well land somewhere else, but they've got long careers under their belts. There's cachet there. They're employable, right? They've got something to offer if they desire. But they could also say, you know what, I'm leaving this Looney Tunes industry behind me and I'm going to go somewhere else and make a difference.
Our buddy that we had the show a few months ago, Kurt Gould, that's what, he wasn't forced out. He was tired of it. He'd been doing it for 20 years. It was time to move on. It's time to move on.
And let's just turn the tables. Perkins and Crawford and Merrills and all the other people who have been through the WotC revolving doors, Jesus Christ, don't you think they're a little tired of people on Talking Crit talking about their lives? And
we're the least of their worries. We're the least.
Jesus Christ, right? Like, we're not like the angry Twitter mob that tore into Frank and everybody else.
Well, but it means that they're important. Like personally, the way I'm looking at it is, if you spend 20 years at a company like WotC, who every couple of years has to do, all right, time to downsize.
Look,
Who
Kurt's in the
is
chat.
costing us the
Kurt's
most
in the
money?
chat
Oh,
and
there he
says
is.
vow of silence, right? Like,
Fine.
Well, because he's at the monastery.
you
But,
know,
He's at the monastery.
never.
Yeah, but I mean, when you can leave on your own terms, as opposed to having WotC going, oh well, you know what, your salary, I can hire 2 interns and somebody to bring me coffee every morning for what I'm paying you. You know, it suddenly becomes, I'll leave on my own terms.
Listen,
You know,
I'm okay. Never assign to malice what is probably sheer stupidity. That's rule number one. Number two is don't look for conspiracy theories, because the lack of evidence will then be cited by a conspiracy theorist as proof of this conspiracy. And number three, right? Like, life's too short for this bullshit. I wish them the best. I hope for them the best, and I just call it. You know, we're on week 3 or 4 of this, and again, like, I look behind me and my field of fucks is barren, and I have not one to give. And it's not that I wish any of these guys bad. I just, you know, we got other hot stuff to talk about. Jesus Christ, we got good stuff.
definitely.
Well, so yeah, and look,
All right.
look, they did what they wanted to do. They did it for 10 years. Time to roll. I think the timing is odd in that they may have both been approached with, like, hey, we're you guys did everything. Is there anything else you want to do? And they may have just thought it over and said, no, I mean, what else is there to do? I mean, we could work here another 10 years, but what are you doing different? You're not going to do anything different or interesting. Like I said, I mean, I know Kurt loved his job for a long time, but after a while, it just wears on you. I mean, I was ready. I quit my job after 15 years. I mean, I didn't even last 20. I couldn't do it anymore. It was driving me insane. It was a customer service job, and so I mean, I couldn't do it. So I can understand 20 years on the job. Yeah, that's a tough.
Yeah, right. And so somebody says Watergate did happen after all. Sure. But Watergate wasn't a conspiracy. Watergate was like one of the worst burglaries of all time, with a cast of idiots. And I just
incompetent individuals.
Okay, so here's my favorite line out of all things Watergate, right? Put all the president's men aside, put all the things you've ever seen in the movie, put all the reading. What's his name that did the apology tour on campuses? I can't remember his name. Put all of that aside.
G. Gordon Liddy.
No, it wasn't Liddy that went around doing apologies. It was somebody else.
Liddy was the only one that stood firm and said,
but Liddy is the guy for my favorite story of all things, right? So G. Gordon Liddy gets convicted. He's found to have he committed a felony, and he loses the legal right to own and possess firearms. He cannot purchase firearms. And somebody asked him one time on a radio show, hey, do you ever get like threats? And he said, I get threats all the time, right? I get threats all the time. And he says, well, how do you live with that? And he says, well, it's really easy. He says, I'm a convicted felon, which means I cannot legally possess firearms. I can't buy firearms and so on and so forth. He says, but Mrs. Liddy has a spectacular firearm collection that she stores on my side of the bed. And I was like, okay, G. Gordon gets it, right? Like,
if he just happens to reach for a gun at night, he doesn't know that that's probably his wife's gun.
And it's, I always thought that was really funny.
I can't remember the guy. It was a liberal kind of, I guess you call him lefty guy. I cannot remember the reporter. He said, all respect to G. Gordon Liddy. He was the only actual badass out of the Watergate because he just said, screw it, I'm going to prison. I'm not cutting deals. I'm not turning over names. I'm just put me in prison and we'll just do it. Because he goes, that's a badass. That guy was a badass. So yes, good. By the way, also in 2 really good episodes of Miami Vice, if you are in Miami Vice.
Yes.
He was Captain Real Estate. He was
I actually got the box set of Miami Vice. Did we talk about this?
Yes, we did.
Yes, the Tubbs is absolutely worse than you remember, but Crockett is infinitely better than you remember.
Worse actor than you remember.
Oh my God! And I was reminded after the show that actually he had done the 1-800 call in what is it?
Party line?
The people throw money at for fortune tellers.
Oh,
he was the first face of a fortune telling scheme, an 800 number that they charged you, and then they fired him and they went with like Miss Zelda or whatever her name was.
Oh boy,
and
they did the right thing. Yeah,
that was her big deal, that they washed out Tubbs and then they brought him in, which I always enjoyed.
He couldn't even advertise a psychic hotline.
He couldn't even. Yes, that was it. The psychic hotline. Yes, that was the best. And we talked about this. That Lieutenant Castillo.
Call me now. Call me now.
The best part of the show was they did the pilot, and the pilot is hard, right? It's Michael Mann, young, hungry Michael Mann, trying to deliver a great pilot.
I can feel it coming.
And it lands, yes.
Tonight.
And,
oh yeah.
And Crockett has to put his longtime friend in jail for betraying him.
Yep.
And then it cuts to Phil Collins' song.
Oh
and
yeah.
So that airs, and then there's like 2 or 3 episodes that were already in the can, and they're amazing. But the network is getting feedback, and they're watching it when it airs, and so on. And Michael Mann says, "Holy shit, we made a terrible mistake, and we have gone with the standard 1970s cliche of the guy in charge of all the detectives. Like, he could be Barney Miller, but he's not. He's like a Cuban American Barney Miller."
Yep.
And he says, we take one look at this, and they didn't like how he came across in the 2nd episode and the 3rd episode, and I think it was the 5th episode. But they very quickly are like, we need to get out from under this because we've created the problem. And so they kill him. He takes a bullet for Crockett and dies dies in Crockett's arms. And at the end of that show, I think it's the end of that show or the start of the next one, is where they introduce James Edward Olmos.
Oh,
and James Edward Olmos,
that part.
And James Edward Olmos, and he has nothing to do with anything that ever came before in the head of a group of police detectives. You know, he's quiet, he's taciturn, he's got a past, but he's not going to fucking share it with you people. And when somebody mouths off to him, and I can't remember who it is, somebody mouths off to him in his first real episode, he gets an inch from their face and is like, never talk to me like that again. And the entire room just goes stone cold quiet. And you're just like, we are in uncharted territory. It was
whenever he called somebody in his office, because he had that glass office with all the glass walls.
Yes.
When he called you in there, as I'm watching it, you're scared. You're like, holy shit, somebody's about to get chewed out. He's never going to raise his voice, but he is going to F you up. And they'd go in there and he wouldn't be facing them. And he'd go, would you guys think you were doing that?
Oh, it's just wonderful.
And they were just like, sorry, sir.
And it holds up so well. Yeah. Like, it really does. It holds up so well.
Almost
I think you just can't give it enough credit for how great it is.
The writing was really, really good.
And
it got a little silly. It got silly as it went along. There was a mistaken identity plot line at one point with Crockett, and was kind of weird. But no, the villains were great. They had oh gosh, there's some episodes I still remember this day. Like I said, the G. Gordon Liddy episodes are great, where he's the bad guy. They have an episode.
Let's talk about one of the things that Mann captured, which was exactly the problem in Miami. Every time you took out a coke dealer, 2 more popped up in his place. And that was the hydra that they were facing, right? The law enforcement couldn't put these guys away fast enough. And Mann's run on Miami Vice really shows you that. Like, it's so slippery and so on. But let's give credit where credit is due. One of the greatest gun fu moments, right? Like, I'm a big fan of Heat. Everybody knows I love the movie Heat. And I can't tell you how many hours I spent trying to do transitions as smoothly as Val Kilmer's reloads in the bank robbery scene, right? When the U.S. Marine Corps is using this as an instruction to cadets to show them how to do combat reloads, like, man nails it. But the one that nobody ever talks about, the movie Collateral with Tom Cruise and Jamie Foxx. You guys know what I'm talking about?
Yes, where he's the cab driver.
He's the assassin.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Tom Cruise is the assassin.
He has to drive around Fox, or he has to drive around Cruise, who is the assassin. Yes, I remember.
Yes,
that.
Yeah. And so Jamie Foxx has to deal with the fact that he's now got a gun to his head, taking the assassin from stop to stop to stop to stop. And one of my favorite things in all movie gun fu moments is that there is a wonderful scene where Tom Cruise is stopped by two meth heads, and he pulls off. He's got a gun pointed at him, and he pulls off a double tap to both with an H&K USP in a brilliant draw, fire, and controlling the moment. Like, he swipes the other guy's gun to the side and puts two in his chest and puts two in the other guy's chest. And I spent an inordinate amount of time practicing that drill. After I saw it, I was just like, holy smokes. But that's man's attention to detail. He's going to deliver. That movie, To Live and Die in LA, with one of the greatest.
Great movie. Yeah, it's a great movie. Yeah.
There's so many great things and Michael Mann's had a hand on all of it.
By the way, his daughter is now a director, and she's done some stuff, and her stuff's good too, I believe. I'm trying to remember where I saw her name the other day. I was like, oh, that was a pretty good movie. So she's doing stuff too, and yeah, he did a really good. He did one of the Silence of the Lambs movies before it became a franchise.
Manhunter,
which was good. It wasn't better than the ones with what's his name in it playing.
Well, yeah, but that's got what's his name, Peterson. It
had Peterson. Yeah, it was good. It was good. It wasn't. I mean, it didn't follow the book storyline as well as the later ones did. When they had Hopkins, when they got Hopkins was amazing in the role. But it was still very good. It's worth hunting up if you want to look at a very stylishly made '80s movie. It was very, the film, the cinematography is amazing. Manhunter, it's really good. I'll have to look up his daughter. I can't remember what she's done. But she's also in the business now, so to speak. Yeah, I was just looking here. I'm looking at the Wikipedia page for Miami Vice, and the list of that was probably the one thing that made it really iconic was the music. They had all the. I mean, I'm looking. There's a list here about 50 bands that they had, which is it's the who's who of '80s rock. Peter Gabriel, U2. Pete Townsend, Power Station, Sinead O'Connor, Kate Bush, Jackson. I mean, it just was the who's who of rock and roll. So that was a Friday night staple in my bachelor house. So I wasn't going to a club. We were all sitting around watching Miami Vice back in the day. It was awesome. So thanks for those memories.
Oh God. Well, the whole point was MTV Cops. That was the remit that they got. Go make MTV Cops. And so he did. And when you look at the breadth of Mann's career, just great stuff. Absolutely. Manhunter was well made. All of these are just anything with Michael Mann I'm in, right? But really and truly, right? I practiced an entire summer going to the range and doing that exercise where you go from draw to 2 and 2, and I spent countless hours working on it.
Have you ever watched any of the training videos that Keanu Reeves does for the John Wick?
Terran Tactical.
Amazing.
Yes.
He's another of those guys that, look, I want to do it right. I don't want to have special effects. I don't want to have a stunt man. And so when you see him doing stuff in the John Wick movies, that's him doing it. And
when he's using 3-gun shotgun reload tricks, I bow to the master, right? I love that stuff. I just love that stuff. I 3-gun. If I fell back into the 3-gun hole, I would never come out again. Right? I leaned over and I saw the abyss, and the abyss stared back at me and said, "Come on!" And I was just like, "Oh, I got to stop. I just got to stop."
All right. So enough of our Miami Vice love here. We have a couple other things I wanted to talk about. We wanted to talk about. One of them was, did everybody see the Troll Lord Games email they sent out this week?
Wonderful. Everything we've been talking about on this show for weeks and weeks. And Steve Chenault pulled back the cover and said, here it is, and explained everything. And it's fabulous. Absolutely fabulous.
They were, I mean, he doesn't really pat himself on the back a lot. He does a little bit, but their decision to buy a printing studio and open their own printer was amazingly prescient considering what's going on now. And they from what he said in the email, they're doing just fine. They're not having any problems. I mean, they may have to raise prices a little bit, but just because of paper costs and stuff like that. But they are well set up to do great things in the industry in the next few years because they are not going to have a problem with China. Now, they do have to have their hardbacks printed off site, right, Eric?
Yes, but full American printers.
Yes, but yes, they are fully American printing, and they can do all the soft covers that they need. And it was a really interesting email because he did pull back the curtain. Not a lot of companies will do that. Not a lot of companies will let you know here's exactly what's going on. But I think that was part of that was to let people know, look, the Castles of Gig stuff's going to get out. It's going to be fine. We're going to handle that here. Don't worry about that. That is not going to be a problem for us. I don't see a lot of companies that have that kind of open relationship with their fans and other people enough to say stuff like that. So I thought that was really good. I thought it was really good they did that.
Yeah, I've talked about this. And again, I think they don't get enough credit. I thought, interestingly enough, he talks about how they're expanding their printing operation. They're going to build a new building and expand. And in true Steve Chenault fashion, he said, if you're a publisher and you want help, reach out to me and I'll steer you in the right direction and let you know what I think this is an industry where we get too cloistered and we get siloed and people don't want to talk to people and help people. And that's a terrible mistake. And I think Steve Chenault is absolutely, he's just one of the best. And he keeps demonstrating that and a willingness to help people and so on and so forth. So yeah, I think you can go one of two ways. You can panic and the sky's falling, or you just pick up your pieces and figure out how you're going to get stuff printed and go forward from there. And
well, I think the first week there was a lot of panic, but now that people have been able to take a step back, there's been a lot of, all right, I got to pivot. How is my pivot going to work? How is it going to affect me? And that was great of Steve because he's not treating it as a zero sum, right? He's not. Right. Steve's not saying if I help other publishers and printers, I'm screwing myself. He's like, no, there's enough here for all of us to eat. Let's bring everybody up as an industry.
Yes, and I wish people weren't that way, but they're going to be that way.
He talks about just a little bit about the studio they have and how they've had to replace a few items and just running it. Is this any kind of a, I don't know, is this a shot across the bow to anybody else that is thinking about doing printing that they should go ahead and buy their own printers? Or is there even a volume? Do you have to have a certain volume to even think about doing something like that?
Well, I think it comes down to a mix of things, right? This is why I always appreciate it when companies say we want to make miniature figures. And I also appreciate when somebody says this is not what we do. We need to license this out and let somebody else make our miniature figures. And I think part of it is it comes down to, do you want to add that level of infrastructure to your bottom line? Well, what are some of the advantages? And we've talked about this. By bringing it all in-house, Troll Lord widens their margins. They can sell a book and they keep more profit to keep a healthy Troll Lord Games making more things that people love. Mm-hmm. But there's an expense. There's a cost. There's a cost to doing this. I'm pretty sure I remember that Troll Lord did a Kickstarter to buy their first real press. I think that's what I sort of remember. That would have been somewhere around 2012, 2015, somewhere in there. But I remember when that took place, and they raised money so they could make the investment. And what you have to realize is that a lot of this is about bringing your quality control back into house.
Right.
And you can really you can cut away a lot of the fat. You can really have a hand on it. It doesn't mean if you're making a mistake, it doesn't make the mistakes go away, but it certainly does give you a hand on it that you didn't have before. And that's what you want. You really want to have that control of it. So let's talk about costs, right? So let's call it a $50 role-playing game book. Most stores at this point are buying anywhere between 40 to 47% off, but we'll say 40 just to keep it sort of simple. And so they buy through distributors. So they're paying, 40% off, make it easy. Let's say that they're paying 30 or $28 for a copy of the book that they sell, or not $30. We'll call it $30. And so their inventory is tied up at $30. The manufacturer has sold through a distributor, usually at 60% off, 60 to 55% off, which that gives the margin for the distributor to be a distributor. And then you get into how much profit is the company making when they're selling to a distribution model, right? Well, this is where padding your margin by an extra dollar or $1.50 by printing it yourself, that's huge, particularly on volumes, right? If you're printing 5,000 copies of the book and you're making an extra $6,500 on the print run, okay, and a lot of the publishers that we talk about now are bypassing most of distribution and going direct to consumers, and selling at MSRP or occasionally having sales. Goodman sells mostly all year long, but they also have a number of sales sprinkled throughout the year where you can save a bunch of money. But even when they're selling direct at sale, they're still selling it for 3 times, sometimes 4 times what it costs to print. Not what it costs to make, but what it costs to print. That's tremendous. That's a tremendous bottom line multiplier, force multiplier. I think Steve hit on a piece that a lot of people don't want to talk about. When we chase low cost offshore, it's American manufacturing that suffers. And Steve has taken a stand that, he used to print in the it used to be he printed in Canada and then he brought it domestically, and then he chose to actually have a proper print shop. And I don't know how many guys that Steve employs at Troll Lord who just work in the print shop. I don't mean the creatives, I don't mean the writers, I don't mean the artists. I think like a lot of people, he does the freelance artist. I don't think he has anybody in-house that's an artist, but he has a stable of artists that he uses. And Steve has said, I'm going to have this this is in our portfolio, and this is what we're going to do, and this is the standard, and this is what I want. I have an embarrassing amount of early Troll Lord stuff. And if you look at the magazine, what was the magazine they did? Not the Adventure. Crusader. When you look at early issues of Crusader, it's like early issues of Dragon. Holy shit, you really want it. You have to want these things. You do. You really have to want these things. And they got better. They got dramatically better, and then they quit. But it's not. I mean, you watch all of these companies that we love, and you go through the progression curve as they get better and better and better. When you look at WotC 3.0 products versus 5.0, a mountain of difference. Very, very different. And oh God, the 1990s was the worst time for RPGs. And there's there's still people out there that design games that look like 1990s RPGs and Dragon Magazine. And it's this horrible period where everybody discovered Aldous PageMaker and then Photoshop, and it's so cliched and so awful. And the sooner people shook that off, the better they were. But Steve learned a lot of lessons. He learned a lot of lessons. And he's applied them to his business, and he's made his business better and stronger. Trollord didn't start off printing with a printing unit. They started off going to Kinko's and having their stuff run off. And that's where a lot of RPG companies start out. But he certainly has said, hey, this is our path. It may not be right for you. If you're interested in exploring options, I'm here to help. How can we help you? And I don't think he gets enough credit for that. I just don't. So.
If you can find the post, it's a really interesting post to read because he does go into some really interesting. He goes into quite a bit of detail about what they're doing and how they did it, and he credits his brother with being the one that had the idea, which is really cool. And so good for them. I'm glad they're doing good. And I just saw that Greg Chubby Funster in the chat said something that I have noticed. Is that the drive-through RPG price increase on April 1st was overplayed. Turned out not to be as much as everyone feared. I checked prices before and after, and the same thing. It was not quite as apocalyptic as people were led to believe.
No,
we're talking less than $1 a book in most cases. I know, I know that's more, but it's not the apocalyptic totals.
It isn't a tripling
by some people.
It isn't a doubling or a tripling. And let's be clear. I have heard. I used to be on an industry mailing list, and sweet Jesus, I used to see all the pain and hair pulling out over various printers. And I used to keep a Post-it note I had 2 Post-it notes that if I ever wanted to print something, these were the printers that I heard great things about. And sweet Jesus, if I ever wanted to print something, these were the printers I would never go near. And there's all sorts of stories I heard about the guys in Asia, in China, a really bad printer in China. There was a printer in Canada that a known name had a lot of trouble. And they essentially said, sue us. Go ahead. You don't have pockets deep enough to sue us.
Wow.
And it took, I made a connection. I had a friend in Calgary who was a lawyer, and I said, they need some help. And he said, I'll do it pro bono. I'd be glad to. And he stepped in and talked to the printer and said, this is a problem. This is a problem. This is a problem. This is what we're going to do. And if you don't fix it, this is what we're going to do. And they were like, we'll fix it. And that's great, right? But not everybody has access to one of Alberta's top litigators. And that's why this stuff is important. And that's why Steve Chenault's saying, I would be glad to help. He can give people advice. And I would hope, I genuinely hope the RPG industry chases lowest cost. But sometimes you get exactly what you're going to get with chasing the lowest price. And I would love to see some of this kind of stuff coming back onshore in some way, shape, or form. And it doesn't have to be the U.S. It could go to a Canadian printing firm. I don't know of any Mexican printing firms, but there are plenty of good Canadian and U.S. printing companies that can handle the stuff that the RPG industry is looking for. They just need a shot, and this might give them that. So that'd be great. Oh God, I put everybody to sleep.
No.
I don't disagree with any of that. So we had one more thing I wanted to talk about. We can talk about this for a while because this is really interesting and it cuts to the whole industry about what's going on in the last few years. There was a really interesting post from WotC this week about the Creative Commons. And Eric, I'm going to let you sum this up because I bet this is something that have you made a show on this yet, or
I actually there is one that is up. If you're a member, you can watch it now. But if you're not a member, you'll see it in the morning.
Well, I'm not a member, I guess, because I did not see it. Well,
yeah. I'm sorry.
We're not important enough.
No,
Oh,
not at all. We don't get free membership.
Sorry, man. Sorry. But so basically, this is what's going on. Next Tuesday, the 22nd, WotC is releasing the new SRD for D&D 5.2. I guess is what they're calling it. It's the 5.2 SRD. So the changes that are in D&D 2024, as we've been calling it, will be reflected in the new SRD. It will be released under Creative Commons 4.0. It will not be released under the Open Game License. At the same time, the basic rules will release on D&D Beyond. They will not be released under the Creative Commons rules either. So, but the SRD will be released under Creative Commons, and there's been a lot of talk, especially amongst people that are, bounce things in my communities about how the OGL better protected your IP than the Creative Commons as a third-party publisher, because by using the Creative Commons, you're basically putting your stuff out there for WotC to potentially use to power an AI or something. That's okay, Mike. It's like you sealing boxes. It's nothing different.
Well, no, I was going to say. So I thought this was really interesting because here's so when this all went down 2 years ago, the OGL fiasco. There was a lot of people that were willing to go to the mat with WotC about the OGL because they did not think they had the power to actually end it based on what. Whoa, we lost you. Based on what they actually said, and based on what they actually wanted to do. Right. And there was a lot because remember the main thing they used was they were discrediting Ryan Dancy's statement. That was meant. They said, well, he said it's in perpetuity. What does perpetuity actually mean? You know,
doesn't mean nothing.
Yeah, we don't think it means anything. So this is basically, so a lot of people said, well, why stop using the OGL? Well, and then WotC's reply was, well, we're going to give you the Creative Commons. Why would you need the OGL? You don't need the OGL anymore. The Creative Commons is going to cover everything. And then a lot of experts, experts, I'm going to use a quotation marks, popped up and said, WotC is right. The Creative Commons offers you much more protection. There is no reason to ever use the OGL again. And many people in our industry just said, no, we're just going to keep using the OGL until they tell us we can't use the OGL. And to this date, 2 years later, we have not been told not to use the OGL. It's been suggested that any day now they could take it away, but I think they're even off that wagon, aren't they, Garrick? I haven't heard them threaten OGL.
They want the OGL to fade away. They don't want people using the OGL. They would rather have people use the Creative Commons. So, which is interesting. Now, we're supposed to be seeing the 3.5 SRD released under the Creative Commons, but
which never was up till now. Yes, which never was.
Yeah.
So anyway, the main issue that people are having with this, when this came out, you're like, okay, whatever. And then people started pointing out is there is some codicils in there, what they've written, that if you publish under Creative Commons, they can basically use your creations for AI mining.
Yes.
Is that what you got out of it too when you read it? Is it okay? Yeah. You can publish it on your own. You can own your own material. It all belongs to you. But when we start our AI engine up, your stuff's going to be thrown in the AI engine along with everything else.
So under the Creative Commons Attribution 4.0 license, a creator does not have to be reimbursed if their creation is used in a derivative work. The only requirement is proper attribution to the original creator, along with compliance to the license's terms. So it could, you could just be listed. It's like, hey, Bad Mike's Monster of the Week was used in this. There, you're credited, and the part that nobody's ever going to read goes by at 5,000 words a second.
Wow.
You know. So yeah.
So am I wrong? Am I wrong? But this sounds like it's a backdoor into basically owning your material. We don't own your material, but yeah, we kind of will, because we kind of got to own your material because we can strip mine it whenever we want to for ideas and or if something similar to this appears in one of our works, well, maybe our AI just pulled it up.
Yeah, so,
as Greg says, the overwhelming response was skepticism, distrust, and hatred, which is shocking. I'm shocked because what has WotC done in the last couple of years that would make you ever doubt their good intentions about something like that?
They only mean the best for us, sir. They only mean the best. They have the Creative Commons was for you, by the way. It wasn't for them. It wasn't a move that they did for their own benefit, and it's looking like it was. Now, they initially on the 5.1, they did screw up. They did release certain terms into Creative Commons they didn't plan to, like Shroud, I believe, was one of them. But yeah, again,
so you still can't. So you still can't use, like you said, you can't use Strahd. Oh well, no, they released Strahd, right? Didn't they release
Strahd under the Creative Commons? They boo-booed.
Right. But you still can't. I would not take my chances.
You can use the name Strahd, but you cannot use the. I guess the
bartender's name is Bob Strahd. Yeah,
Bob Strahd.
So you can't have a vampire, eternal vampire named Strahd.
No. It's Strahd the undead ghoul.
Okay, I got
there you go.
Maybe they're cousins or something. So yeah, on the surface, this looks like. I guess if you just really, really scrape the surface and weren't looking at it, you go, oh, that's really cool that they're going to let you own your own material over Creative Commons. And then once you look 2 inches below the surface, you're like, yeah, not a good deal. And look, this has been going on a long time with the Adventure League stuff and the what's the other stuff? What's the program where you can ride into their worlds except they own the material?
Oh, the DM's Guild.
Yeah, the DM's Guild, which anybody with half a brain cell should have never wrote anything for DM's Guild because it says right in the contract we own this lock, stock, and barrel. We own everything about it. I don't even know. Are they required to give you any kind of a attaboy?
And here's the other thing too. Once you share it in the DM's Guild, it stays in the DM's Guild. You can't have a derivative of that product outside the DM's Guild. So if like Rob Conley wanted to do a 5e Black Marsh, he could, but then he could not be publishing the OSR version, the Sword of Wizardry version, because that would be a violation of the contract for the community. Whatever the community.
I don't see a reason why you would do it. Then this just doesn't seem like it's a good deal in any way, shape, or form. And like I said, and there's still plenty of people out there, and I've talked to a few people in the last 24 hours, people I know in the game industry, that said, well, this is absolutely why I stayed with the OSR, because I'm sorry, with the OGL, because they haven't done anything to absolutely shut it down. And I was wrong. And I owe Mark Greenberg a bottle of whiskey because I told Mark that they would probably shut the OGL down in a year or so, and they never did. And so as long as it's not shut down, shoot. I just as soon use the OGL to publish under. I don't know if they're ever going to take the. I mean, what do you think, Jim?
Again,
if the time to actually shut the OGL down, I don't know why they would at this point.
I think that there are WotC employees that are still in the burn ward from where they got burned when the OGL fiasco took place 2 years ago. The pushback reached legendary proportions, and it put a lot of people on notice as to. I mean, people were skipping WotC and going to Hasbro corporate and complaining to Hasbro in Pawtucket. And when executives come in and find a voicemail filled with angry, vitriolic gamers, and they're like, what the hell is this? They're going to start making calls to Renton, Washington at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, waking people up at 8 o'clock saying, what the fuck did you do? And that's exactly it. The pushback made mainstream financial news. So why would they go to pick that fight again? And they very quickly realized they had made mistakes. We've heard all sorts of stories about how this happened, and so on and so forth. I think the OGL, they're not going to move on the OGL because they're terrified of what would happen if they did. Now, the Creative Commons. Kelsey, we talk about Shadow Dark probably too much, but Kelsey started playing in that sandbox and had success in that sandbox. And I don't think it's a bad idea, right? I think most of the things that get published that I've ever seen are troporific. I think that I have seen 1 good for 9 bad is probably my ratio. I don't go through it and buy a bunch and so on and so forth. I think that when you are starting out in the game industry and you want some bona fides, and it's really easy to start off in that world, get some success, stretch your creative muscles, come up with something. If you have success, you make money, and then it goes from there. And that's great. Like, that's fabulous. But at some point you get tired. We remember Planet of the Apes. Who remembers the Mego Planet of the Apes action figures?
Oh yes, I owned them all. I owned them all, Jim.
So I had 1 astronaut. My friend Mike had 1 astronaut. And my friend Dean had fucking Ape City. He had all of them. He had gorillas, he had the fortress, he had the cart, he had astronauts, he had it all. And eventually you get tired of having just 1 astronaut and going to Dean's house to play with stuff, and you decide you want your own stuff to play with. And so eventually people will get tired of working within the WotC ecosystem of the Creative Commons and the DMs Guild and so on and so forth. And they'll do something else because you can make a living of some sort in the DMs Guild, or you can distinguish yourself and do something a la Shadow Dark.
Right.
And that's, I know we talk about Shadow Dark. Let's talk about Palladium. Like, somebody's talking about Palladium here, and I think this is a good point. Palladium doesn't open up their system. Palladium doesn't, they don't have any sort of licensing system and so on and so forth. If you want to play in Palladium's world, you write for Palladium or you don't play in Palladium's world. And Kevin Simbita has a well-earned reputation for being, what's the word I'm pondering? Litigious.
Asshole? Oh, I'm sorry, litigious.
Well, that too. And not cool, right? But WotC gives people who are earnest and desirous to play in their world a way to play in their world. And they desperately wish the OGL would go away. But short of another mob of pitchforks and torches, I don't see them doing that. I just don't. Because if they do try to put it down, I think the public reaction that was so negative last time will emerge even stronger. And number 2, I'm not sure, and Mark Greenberg, who's obviously watching, can chat in, but I mean, Mark was involved with discussing some things with people about this at the time that it happened. I don't know how much standing they have on the perpetual, perpetual doesn't mean perpetual. I just stick with the OGL and don't look back, or create something new and unique that's yours.
But you understand, Jim, and this was the problem when this all happened. Everybody was petrified. But once they said the OGL was gone, it just shut the whole industry down for a month. Because I know that as Frog God Games, we didn't know what to do. We didn't know what to do. I mean, until it was all figured out. And then even then, the aftershock went all through the year of 2023. It went through the entire year. Everybody was petrified to publish anything OGL, because they just didn't know, am I going to publish this in a month from now? They say, yeah, okay, well, we gave you enough time to switch Creative Commons, OGL shut down, we're going to pursue you legally. Because as we all know, it doesn't matter if WotC's right or not, it just matters how deep their pockets are compared to yours. Right. And they could just, Eric knows how that works, and so
that's right. And come on, let's talk about.
No, I'm sorry, Eric, I love you, buddy.
I think the thing you come back to is that what's the tactical advantage for WotC to pick a fight it doesn't need to pick to create anti-WotC public sentiment? Like, why would they? I mean, this would be an own goal. And don't get me wrong, they've owned gold before, but frankly, it's it's like knowing that in the back of your property there's a gigantic hornet's nest, and they're not just hornets, they're murder hornets, and they're ready to come after you. And all you have to do is go back there and poke the murder hornets. Why would you go poke the murder hornets? But you know what? I mean, the day it happens, I'll make murder hornet T-shirts and we'll sell them, and everybody will have a great time.
So Ty said something there, and this was true. He said, my greatest disappointment was not having the opportunity to release model legal pleadings for anyone to use against Watson. They folded before I could finish them. And we have a lot of. What's the great thing about the gaming community is we have a lot of lawyers in the gaming community, not just Ty, but Mark Greenberg, Matt Finch.
I'm sorry, here. Let me make sure I say we have a mix of practicing lawyers and recently retired lawyers who are no longer practicing.
Who are
there, I said it for you, Greenberg.
World travelers, yes. But I think most of the ones that I talked to during this time, and Eric at the same time, said that this is legally this wouldn't succeed, but so I guess it goes down to would they have taken the chance to actually go to trial with this, and what if they lost?
Well, that's just it. Their legal counsel at some point would have said, "Do we want to do this?
Right?
Do we really want to do this?" And I think it's a fight. It's like literally walking into the room and saying, that guy, the biggest, angriest guy that's got gang tattoos, that looks like he has a gun under his belt, he's the guy I'm going to walk in and slap. Because really and truly, why would you do this? And it may be that at some point 5 or 10 years from now they decide that they want to do this. But Ryan Dancy's postings from the time, and they are legion, and his absolute description of what the point of the OGL was, why they wrote it the way that they did, all of this can be used in evidence. I just don't see it.
But Ty made a point is that they're dumb enough to do it once, they're dumb enough to do it again. What if they have a big turnover again? What if everybody that learned their lesson, you're right, this is dumb. What if they're all out and the new guys come in, and and everybody that's worked for a company, what happens is like my old boss used to say, these guys come in, they're like pigeons. They come in, they crap all over everything, they fly off. And then so you have the new people go, hey, have you ever tried this before? Let's try to legally, so I wouldn't say it would never happen. But the chances are,
yes, you're right.
This group is not going to let it happen. But the next group, God knows if they're
somebody will be like, I think the murder hornets have died off or are no longer paying attention to this. Mm-hmm. And I think we'd be fine to go over there and wave our giant stick into their nest. And the problem is they will discover that not only are the murdered hornets very angry and still angry and only looking for a new thing to attack, but they will delight in attacking. And I give up. That's the whole thing too. With the new OGL, they tried the gaslighting aspect of it's better than the other OGL. Yeah. It'll serve you better. So, which is why people are a little like. Sure, I look forward to GleeMax 2.0.
All right,
GleeMax, another mention of GleeMax. Now. We're going to have to start doing GleeMax bingo.
I'm sorry, but GleeMax. Anyway, so let's talk about something else. Let's talk about Chaosium Con, because Chaosium Con was this past week.
Oh, that's right. Were you there?
I did not go, but I want to talk about Chaosium Con. No. So Chaosium Con, I love the notion of Chaosium Con, and they have decided to brave all the sane things they could do by throwing all their sanity in the wind and having a convention very shortly after GaryCon over in Michigan at the end of March, start of April. And sweet Jesus, right? Like, I know what the weather is like. You roll your dice and you take your good lumps with your bad weather-wise. But the reports are a great show. They've made a point every year to try to empty out the Chaosium archives to get things to people that would love and appreciate them. I would say that if you are a Call of Cthulhu aficionado, what I would encourage you to do more than anything else is make the time and make the pilgrimage and go to Chaosium Con. It's still small. it's still going through growing pains, right? And ideally, if enough people show up, I've heard mixed reviews of the hotel, and come on, Mike, you can talk to this. It takes a while for a hotel to get its head around things. I've heard
they are on year 3 though. They are on year 3.
That's right. But
you should be getting in the same ball of wax by year 3.
Last year, I heard a lot of things about coffee. And things were so bad with coffee that this year I think they had a coffee truck or something else because the hotel's coffee was garbage.
Jim, we that's why we have food trucks. We have food trucks because there's so many issues with the restaurant, and Gary and I and David have talked about it. And look, we're all luckily the hotel is pro food truck. We're going to have an absolutely amazing lineup of food trucks this year. But it's because we saw a problem. The problem is the restaurant is slow. It's small. It gets overwhelmed. It can't deal, no matter what they tell us every year, it can't deal with the rush. And so we just do that. And what they're going to have to do, the guys, I wouldn't tell Rick Mines how to run a con because he probably knows, but that's something you're going to have to deal with them and say, and they did. Apparently, if they have a food truck that does coffee, they've figured it out. Like, we can't trust them to have coffee, so we're going to do our own coffee.
And let's be clear, it's year 3, and everything that goes, you just make it better every year. You try to improve it every year, and so on and so forth. And so I've heard nothing but good things about Chaosium Con from all of my friends who went. I have not been. There was a lack of murder hornets. The murder hornets were not out because it's too cold for the murder hornets. Nobody knits scarves that small for murder hornets. But Chaosium Con is one of these things that's certainly on my radar because I do love me some Call of Cthulhu. And interestingly, Alyssa Faden ran a gigantic Murder on the Orient Express game that ran for 27 hours.
So she and Skeeter ran it. It was, I think, 3 8-hour sessions, I believe. So it's 24. It was 24 hours. And they
had a session 0, and it went really well. And she goes over the top for props because she doesn't have enough hobbies. So I think the problem with having a niche con is you have to have enough people to support a niche con. And so I think Chaosium absolutely deserves their own con because they've got a lot to offer and so on and so forth. And even if Call of Cthulhu is 85 to 90% of what the con offers, it still should do it. I don't think they're going to be running Ring World games. I don't think they're going to be running Thieves World games. But they've got a lot of momentum and good on them. And I think Rick and the crew at Chaosium should get a lot of credit for growing a convention the right way.
It's really interesting, like you said about niche cons, Jim, because, I mean, in a lot of ways, North Texas is a niche con. We cut off signups at 500. We could easily probably have double that. We just don't. But yeah, so when they started it, I thought it was a weird idea because it's like, okay, well, it's a con. They're only running Chaosium games there. They only run. You can't run, a BattleTech game there. It is for Chaosium games only. And so I thought that, like, well, that's going to kind of limit them because really, obviously you have Call of Cthulhu as your big, money maker. Then I guess you could run some Rune Quest or Elf Quest or I don't know, Elric or whatever else Chaosium came up with. But it seems to be working out really well, and I've just heard really, really good things about the con itself. Now we're having some comments in the discussion about how the food sucks, but that's just something you can fix. That you can fix.
These are fixable things.
You can fix the food sucks.
These are the things you can fix.
You can't fix the hotel. I mean, if the hotel is a bad hotel, like it's just bad, you can't fix that. Like, let's say the rooms are terrible or whatever, you can't fix that. You can't. I mean, there's certain things you can't fix, but food you can fix usually. Now, I will say that some people talk about Paige. Much as I love Ron, they say that it's really, the food situation is really dicey there because they can't have food trucks, and that's tough. If you can't have food trucks, you are at the mercy of whoever's putting on the wherever you have the event at, what they're doing. It'd be like if Alex had Gamehole Con and didn't have food trucks. I mean, you'd have to use the food place at the convention center, which is dicey. But luckily, Alex is able to have food trucks. So I'm hoping Ron can work something out at some point where they can have food trucks because that's really that allows you to control the situation much better. And
okay.
that's a huge complaint.
I got a window to make my joke, and you're killing me. John Miller says, how many RuneQuest or Pendragon players are there right now? I don't know, John, but that number is infinitely larger than the number of Cyborg Commando players right now. And trust me, there will be no Cyborg Commando convention.
Oh,
that is not happening.
Dang it. Yeah, I did hear about some Pendragon games being run there, by the way, which is it's a really interesting game system. If you ever want to try a Pendragon game, I did hear about some Chaosium Con Pendragon games, so that would be a place to go if you actually wanted to run or wanted to have one of those games run. But yeah, so I've just heard good things, and they're growing their convention very organically, which means they have X amount one year, then they've got a little more the next year, a little more next year. That's how you grow a really good small niche convention.
Page went for Page. Page was much more aggressive, but the great thing about being so aggressive without food trucks is that Page attendees eat the weaker Page attendees, and then the hardier ones come back, and that's okay. So.
I think they eat the Philly cheesesteak mascot. They're just eating the mascot.
That's right. Are you a new attendee? I've never been to Page before. I mean, cannibals run everywhere, but whatever.
I think Ron is on the ball enough. I think he's going to eventually figure that out. I hope he does, and I hope he'll eventually figure out the food situation there, because that seems to be the one thing that I hear that's holding it back is just the fact that the food situation. And I've heard that there will remain nameless. Eric, by the way, Eric was not one of them, but they remain nameless. People told me that the food situation would be something they might not come back because it was a little difficult. But I think Ron will deal. I think Ron will figure it out. I
love that he's brave enough to go ahead and have it in January, right? Let's give the man credit that weather be damned, we're going to have this show.
He went
that's good.
Straight into the unknown. He went to all the
roll the dice. That's right. You may have 8 attendees, but like the Donner Party, they're going to survive. So a few of them are going to survive and play games. We don't know who.
Well, when we went, when you choose a hotel or a place to run your convention at, I think a lot of conventions fail. And I'll tell you what, Doug was. If you knew Doug, you just know how Doug was. He was very detail oriented and hands on. And so when he went to these hotels, we would discuss everything with him. We did not want surprises. We did not like surprises. Like, for instance, one of the things we always would tell them is you've got to keep the bar open late, because games end at midnight, and after midnight, you will have a mob of people come to the bar and order an amazing amount of booze. And the first place we had the hotel, Marriott, just kind of poo-pooed us. Like, yeah, whatever. And we had a lot of issues keeping the bar open late at the Marriott. So we changed to the Westin. We told them up front, you have got to keep the bar open past midnight. And there was a little bit of pushback on that. And Gary can tell you this pushback even went to like a couple years ago. When we guaranteed them they would make thousands of dollars, if they kept the bar open. And Gary can tell you the story. They finally agreed with us about 3 years ago when we had a bunch of people in there. Gary, I don't know how much they made that night, but it was a lot. And they said, we will always stay open late. No problem at all. So, but you have to communicate with them, and you have to find somebody that's willing to work with you. And at this, at this point, I think Chaosium at this point has enough cred with them and has been able to fill the hotel up probably the last 3 years. They should be able to go in there and say, look, here's what we want. We want this, and this. Can you do this for us?
I am reminded of the Games Workshop Trade Sales Convention in London in 1998. And I think there were 110, maybe about 110, 120 guys from Games Workshop divisions all over the world, including our guy from Japan and the team from Canada. And we spent more in the bar on the first night than the entire cost of lodging everybody in London for the 3 or 4 nights we were in London. And that is a staggering amount of money. Like, I just remember, like, after the first night, they were putting brakes on us because people were just as fast as they could drink them at the pub.
Well, Gary just said, yeah, the night that we told them they were going to stay open late, they made $5,000 in one night. And after that, they're just like, We will stay open. We will stay open. Like, yes, you will lose a lot of money because we're going to drink no matter what. I mean, if you're going to close the bar, we're going to pop out bottles of whiskey around the lobby and we're going to drink. So you might as well make some money off of us because that's, but
go figure.
But yeah, I'm looking forward to going to Chaosium Con one day. It's in Ann Arbor or close to Ann Arbor. Actually, it's in another city close to Ann Arbor, and I'm really looking forward to going there. And I've just heard only good things about it. So I'm really excited about. Look, I'm a huge Call of Cthulhu fan. I don't play it anywhere as much as I would love to. I haven't played it in years and years, but I have a gigantic Call of Cthulhu collection. I really enjoy the game. I like the basic role-playing system. Like I said in the chat, it's not an elegant system, but it covers a lot of different things. If it's just a flat percentile system, and so when you're one thing I really like about the BRP system is that I had people that have played Call of Cthulhu that have literally never played role-playing games before. And if you tell them you have a 5% chance to hit with your knife or a 35% chance with their pistol, they understand immediately. The percentages make perfect sense to them. They're like, oh, well, I don't want to use my knife. I want to use my pistol. So I think the percentage system lends itself very well to beginning gamers. They don't have to figure out, you have to roll a 16 on a 20-sided dice and then this, and they get a saving throw. No, it's just, look, here's your bait. You get this basic chance. If you roll this, you hit, you do this much damage. If it's a critical hit, you do this. And it's really easy for beginning players to understand. And like I said, I've run Call of Cthulhu for a lot of beginning players, and they have no problem picking it up. So basic role playing is I think it's a really underused system, and I think it works pretty well. Yes, I said last night or I said last week that my top secret game going forward, I'm just going to use Call of Cthulhu because it just is easier than the top secret game as it was written. And I think that's a compliment to, yes, please just mute him. Don't let Gary. I just told him he's bad.
After last week's episode, Gary was texting me numbers.
Oh, of course he was, because you let him get under your skin and he knew he could get you. So
no, you mute him and then you don't have to worry about it. So, so let's see what else. What other things? I talked about the Cthulhu Con. I'm sorry, Chaosium Con.
But by the way, I was corrected by Kim on Alyssa's game. Where was it? I think it was 6 4-hour. No, where is it? Oh, Kim, where is it? 4 6-hour sessions.
Oh yeah, because it couldn't be 3 8 hours. We had to split the hairs and make sure everybody understood that it was 4 6 hours.
So, but that's still an all day sucker every day. And like I said, they ran a very classic Call of Cthulhu adventure called Murder in the Orient Express, and I have that. It's a really amazing scenario. It's probably not as a favorite of mine as much as Mass off the tip, but it is really, really good. And so, yeah, they apparently knocked it out of the park. Everybody loved it. So they're running, Alyssa, I believe, is running Call of Cthulhu at North Texas, but not running Orient Express. They will be running that again at Gamehole Con, by the way, if anybody's interested. They will be doing an all day, every day Orient Express at Gamehole. So looking forward to that. Now that she lives in Wisconsin, she can bring all her props in her car. That's why she doesn't do that in Texas, because she can't bring all her props in the car since she and Jack fly in. So Gamehole Con, Gary Con, and Chaosium Con are lucky that she can just bring all her stuff over in the car. So thank goodness she moved to the Midwest.
So what else? What else did we have tonight? I'm still keeping my friend's question in the back pocket here for another half hour or so. But so North Texas registration's come and gone. That went well. Chaosium Con, Gen Con, starting to get rumblings about Gen Con. Interestingly, I never hear anybody talk about Origins. Like, there's never excitement about Origins, and I think that's a systemic problem. I think they really need to be better about that. For the show put on by the Game Manufacturers Association of America, I find it appalling that we don't hear more about Origins, considering it's in Columbus.
Well,
and
I
it's
think
easy
the
to
only
reach.
things we hear about Gamma occasionally are like drama coming out of their leadership, which I look at and I go, all right, pass it, because I don't know the names of the players, but I don't think it helps Origins when this is this drama's been
Well,
going on off and on for.
And it doesn't help that 25 years ago, Gamma's board of directors, there was controversy over one member who was reading people's email because they came through the mail server, and he saw them. Then there was somebody who was using multiple sock puppet accounts. And that person was like I just remember that it just got so radioactively hot that every time I saw GAMA, I just was like, oh God, keep it away, right? Like, I'm a vampire and that's garlic. I don't want nothing to do with it. So let's see what else. I don't know. It looks like a good year for gaming. I'm always pleased when I hear that this convention went well. This convention went well. Pre-reg went good for this and that and the other thing. The next big block is Gen Con's gaming registration opens up in May. I'm not sure, sometime in May.
Okay.
And I don't know. And I'm taking a break from my top secret game came to a good conclusion. Somebody else is going to kick off a Shadow Dark game, so it's going to be fun to sort of try that and kick it around. I have a sequel, Top Secret Adventure, ready to go. I actually started converting characters to Call of Cthulhu and doing some things. So that's kind of intriguing. I got in the mail. I got a True First of Boot Hill. That's very, very nice. But of course, is missing the map of the buildings.
Oh, always missing the map.
But the sheets are still in the back and they've not been torn out. So I'm pained that it doesn't have the one, but it's a beautiful copy, and I'm very, very happy about that.
I found a copy though. Let me see if I can find it again.
That's
I found a copy going through. Oh, here it is.
Oh, it's a second print. I believe it's a second print.
Yep, second print.
Yeah, so, I was just going through some stuff and I found it. And let's see. You know what? I didn't even look here.
I'm sure you have two of the maps. You're the best.
If I have one, no. Well, hold on. I'm not seeing a map in here. Did this one have a map too? Oh dear.
Anyway, so I'm thinking about things, what I'd like to run in the future, right? And I have to say that I'm loath to say this out loud, but it's been 20 years plus since I ran Masks of Nyarlathotep, and Masks of Nyarlathotep is calling me. Like there's this whisper, and Masks is sort of difficult. I think to do Masks online is going to be a little bit dicey, but I'd like to run Masks and sort of give it a shot. I don't know. We'll see.
So I'm going to tell the story because not everybody here has heard it, and I can't even remember. I know Eric's heard it, but I ran Masks in the 80s, and I ran it for a group. The group included one person who had never played Call of Cthulhu and one person who had never played a role-playing game in their life. And so we're creating characters, and I'm explaining how lethal the game is. And the guy that's never played in his life said, the game's set in the 20s. He was like, can I be Indiana Jones? I said, sure. I mean, you roll up a character like, he used a whip and had a gun. And so Indiana Jones and Call of Cthulhu is pretty cool. So that game was probably, honestly, is the most, in my life, has been the most memorable campaign I've ever run. I had music. I'm not a Alyssa fan. This is in the 80s. I had cassette tapes of different music because they go to Africa, Egypt, London, China, and so I had music for all I bought cheap cassette tapes of music from all those areas. So when we were there, we played the music. But the group had a blast. It is an amazing campaign. Now, this is the original campaign, not the add-ons. That since then they've added a lot of stuff. There's a lot more information now. Very famously, the original Masks had an Australian chapter they removed because it was too big. Yep. And later on, they've re-included. It was published later as Terra Australis. Yep. But now I believe that if you buy Masks now, it will have the original deleted Australian chapter in there. Thank God we didn't have it back then, Jim, because it was lethal enough as it was.
But, and I don't know, have you guys ever listened to the HPL Society audio adaptation of Masks of Nyarlathotep?
I have, and they
Oh my
did.
God! Yes.
Oh my God,
Amazing
they're
job.
dying left and right in Australia.
Yeah.
Right. Like, hey, this is a new bunch of characters, and they're gone. Right. There's one like survivor after it's all. Yeah.
They lost a few. They lost. So they had a female reporter that died in New York. They had an amazing. So their group. They had a great group. So their group was the Indiana Jones guy. They had an actor who had gone insane years earlier. He was actually from another scenario. He had gone mentally insane. He was He was like Errol Flynn, and he only fought with a sword. And he thought he was Captain Blood. So he was one of the characters. They had two brothers from the hills of Tennessee, Billy Bob Jones and Billy Joe Bob. So anyway, they were World War I veterans, and they were crack shots with rifles. They had like 90% in the rifle, but they were absolutely the most uneducated, backwards boobs you could ever find. And then you had the core of the party, which were all the intelligent, guys that would read the books and cast the spells. But the more memorable characters were all the bodyguard type characters, the Indiana Jones guy, the crazy actor guy, the other guys. And then there was a guy, his name was Henry Jones. Henry Jones is my youngest brother's character. He was absolutely average. He had no exceptional abilities. He did nothing well, but he would read every book they found and allowed his sanity to go lower and lower and lower just so they would have access to these spells. And God help him, Henry Jones survived the entire mass scene attempt by just hiding and casting spells when the time came. But it's an amazing campaign. They had a absolute blast. We played it over the course of an entire summer and finished up during the holidays because everybody had. So we played the summer. We played some during Thanksgiving holiday, and we finished up during the Christmas holidays when everybody was home. And it was the best campaign I've ever run. Incredibly well written, and just an incredible campaign. The last final combat is it's a James Bond movie. It's in a volcano in China where they're going to launch a missile that will bring about the return of Nyarlathotep to the Earth. And so they're in the volcano rocket lair trying to stop this going off. And there's Shub-Nigguraths. There's cultists. There's the aspect of the Nyarlathotep attacking that the aspect of Nyarlathotep, the mother, the blob mother is actually attacking them, and they're having to fight it off. And it's just the most incredible battle ever. And things are blowing up, and people are screaming and running. People are going insane. And so they finally get out, and as they exit the volcano, there's one last luck roll everybody has to make. So you have to make a luck roll because the island explodes. And
don't spoil it all.
They all made their luck roll except for Billy Bob Jones, the kid from the hills of Tennessee who had saved their ass all during the campaign by just crack shots, putting bullets in high priests' heads, taking out stuff. Failed his luck roll. A rock hits him in the head. He dies, and the group was absolutely devastated at that point.
All right, I got to talk about this. You can't talk about Massive Nyarlathotep without talking about
the companion. Yes.
So Yogg-Sothoth.com got a whole bunch of people involved in a crowd project, and this is the beast that they spawned, which is the Mass of Nyarlathotep companion. You can take me off as center square here. And so I tell you, I beg of you, if you're ever interested in running Mass of Nyarlathotep, this is the thing that would have made every game better. And the file is out there. It's easy to find. The hardcovers are insanely rare. They're impossible to find. This is the Dark Pharaoh edition. And I don't know a whole lot of people that I mean, even in my collector circles, I don't know a lot of people that have one. And it's one of my most prized possessions for Call of Cthulhu, but it is without a doubt the resource to find and look for if you're interested in running Massive Nyarlathotep.
I've heard if you get a PDF of that, you can have it printed. Not saying you should, but I'm saying
no, absolutely. You can get it printed on Lulu or somewhere else.
It's possible to get it printed out.
Yes. Yeah, you should. I absolutely encourage that. But hands down, this is a resource everybody ought to have. Everybody should find a copy. If you've ever thought about running masks, don't run masks without it. You'll just You'll regret
Well, I
it.
ran it without it because I didn't have it back then, Jim. We didn't have the resources. I
Yeah.
had the
Well,
I had the
no,
box
right?
set.
Like,
I had the original box set. That's all I had was
I
the
have
box
an
set.
entire crate. I have an entire crate of 1920s Egyptian resources. I've got the Howard Carter issue of where he found Tutankhamun. I've got all the subsequent National Geographics when they were doing
But
tomb
say,
exploration.
I had original National Geographics. They were cheap back then, the 80s. You could buy
Yeah.
them for $4 at half price books. I had a whole stack of 1920s National Geographics that I hate to admit it, I cut the pictures out because they were $4, but they were from the 20s.
Cool.
And we used those for visual aids during it. It's an amazing campaign. I think, Jim, I think I would give you one piece of advice if you want to run masks, is that there is such a depth of material now. I wouldn't use all of it. It will overwhelm you because I looked at what they have out there now. It is overwhelming. It is absolutely overwhelming.
You have to gauge. I think I'll talk about it this way, right? So this is a good thing to talk about. It is widely regarded as the best RPG adventure ever published.
Not just Call of Cthulhu, the best RPG adventure period. It is.
Ever.
It's absolutely amazing.
And I don't disagree. And I'll tell you what. Unfortunately, and next to the copy, I've got the most recent Chaosium, and it's a slipcase 3-book set.
I've got that also. That's
And I appreciate the depth. I appreciate that they've included Terror Australis. I like all of that. But what I would say is, if you're thinking about running it, the first thing I would suggest you do is get the HPL Society's audio version of the adventure, which is it's like radio. It's just like a drama.
Yeah, it's a radio show. Yeah, basically, yes.
And you should listen to that. And you should listen to that and sort of take notes on pacing and so on, because the real problem with Massive Nyarlathotep is it's going to require a commitment. It's going to require a commitment of time. It's going to require a commitment of an immense amount of prep work to run it adequately. But the problem I think most people will have is that they're going to want to put too much detail into it. And I think you're right. I think you can smother it. It's like a great Dagwood sandwich. A great Dagwood sandwich is fantastic, but when you start making it more and more just because you can, pump the brakes. Mike mentioned that, I think you said that your game ended up around the holidays.
Yeah, absolutely.
There are some key moments in Massive Nyarlathotep that should not come near the Christmas holiday.
Unfortunately, the Kenya chapter.
Kenya
is the summer.
Yes, because the last time I played it ended around Thanksgiving, and I shit you not, everybody was so shell shocked by what happened in Kenya because they had no idea.
It's horrific. It's absolutely horrific. Yes.
And I didn't pull any punches, and the survivors were beaten down.
Mm-hmm.
And really and truly, like, we took a month-long break because it needed that much time before people were ready to come back to the table after what had gone very, very badly.
Very famously, Call of Cthulhu, especially the early scenarios, are unforgiving in a lot of ways.
They pull no punches.
Yeah, and they're horrific. I always point to the David Hargraves Call of Cthulhu adventures, which are some of the most horrific adventures you'll read anywhere. I can't, to the point where you read them today and you can't believe they got away with that in the 80s. It was
and let's just say this, right? You don't need the Massive Nyarlathotep companion. It's just useful because it takes each of the chapters and it gives you more filler material if you want to do that. You could spend a year running a game every week and running masks, and players would have a great time. But it's too much. And truthfully, Massive Nyarlathotep has some really brutal gut punches in it that need to be delivered. And so very famously, one of the things about masks is that people will say, well, if the party didn't pull it off, look at World War II. that World War II is like it ends in the original box set.
Right.
It talks about how if the party didn't pull it off, then World War II sort of played out the way it is.
Right.
And I always say, well, actually, no, the party pulled it off, and World War II, as bad as it was only that bad because the party managed to succeed.
I did the same thing. I said you got like World War II would have been a world destructing war because
horrifically worse.
The elder gods would have been involved, right. It would have been horrific. Yes, because when the whatever the rocket goes off, and this is not a spoiler, the rocket goes off, it's going to open a breach in dimensions, and the aspect of the step will come through, and things are going to get really bad on Earth. Really,
you're spoiling. So
that's
what I would say,
yes, it is.
No, because they tell you that at the beginning. That's what you're supposed to do.
What I would say is that Chaosium has tried a few times to try to catch that lightning in the bottle, and Murder on the Orient Express. It attempts to be that. It attempts to be that same kind of gravitas, but frankly, Murder on the Orient Express, or it's Horror on the Orient Express, because it's trying to riff off of Agatha Christie, okay, but it doesn't have the same sense that Masks does. By the end of New York, you're led to London, and after London, you got a pretty good idea of what the stakes are.
Yeah.
And the party can go a couple of different ways. And I just remember flying into Kenya, right? And all I could think of on the flight into Kenya, because I was my flight was from Charles de Gaulle in Paris to Kenya, in Nairobi, and in Nairobi in Kenya. And all I could think of is I'm going to be in the same place where Karen Blixen had her coffee plantation from the movie Out of Africa and the books, and fucking Masks of Nyarlathotep. and I couldn't explain to my family what I was thinking about, right? But I actually had a PDF of Masks on my phone, and at night I was reading, like on the plane I was reading, and the whole time I was reading I was just like, oh my God, right? But when you're in Africa, when I was in Africa and I'm on top of a mountain and I'm looking at all this and so on and so forth, like there's a lot of that atmosphere that Masks successfully captures. And if you play your cards right, you're going to deal your RPG group, you're going to deal them an experience that they aren't, if they have no idea what's coming, by the end of it, they're going to have a great idea of how hard a game Call of Cthulhu can be. And I don't mean like tough to play. I mean one gut punch after another. And when the survivors of the party are making their way down the mountain, they'll succeed or they won't. But no matter what they've done, they're going, if it's good or bad, they're going to be regrouping, and there's going to be a lot of, don't talk to me. I haven't had my coffee, and I need a day or two to process what just happened.
So one of a couple of things I would say is that I would let every player have two characters, because you're gonna lose one character. It makes it a lot easier and a lot seamless, because I've never liked suddenly here's 5 new people that you don't know that are joining the adventure. I've never liked that method of continuing. But I was going to say, after the Kenya chapter, they went to China, and they did a regrouping, Jim, and they were so traumatized. They hired 4 mercenaries with machine guns to go with them from then on. They're like, we're not going to screw around now. When we run into cultists, it is spray and pray.
It's game on.
They hired 4 Asian mercenaries. They said, we're not going to deal with this anymore. That was so horrific that we want you guys to have guns, bombs, whatever, right, and just good, But it was good because it made great fodder too. They were cannon fodder basically, which is awesome.
And I can't think of a single thing that Chaosium has done, because Horror on the Orient Express the intent was really there, and it was great, and it was executed okay, but the box is terrible. Don't talk to me about the box.
The box is bad.
But I can't think of anything that's come out of Chaosium since that really gets the lightning in a bottle
I'll throw one thing out there, Jim, and it's
Sure.
really good. I've never ran it. I've wanted to because I enjoy it, and that's Mountains of Madness. Mountains of Madness, what I like about Mountains of Madness, what I didn't like about Horror on the Orient Express is it feels like a bunch of different scenarios is kind of all fitted in together. It's not seamless. It's not seamless.
Correct.
I thought Mountains of Madness is you're going down to the Antarctic, and it riffs completely off the Mountains of Madness story by H.P. Lovecraft. It involves getting ready for the trip, the boat trip down there, what happens there, and then the boat trip back. It's very condensed into where you're just here. You're going to be on the boat. You're going to be in Antarctica. You're going to be there, and so there's not a lot of side trek weird stuff. You're there to do the adventure, and it's a very detailed adventure. Once again, there's a kit that goes with it, and there's a bunch of different things you can use. I've never heard an audio version of it. I'm sure there is one out there. But especially the parts where they get into the Lovecraft actual story, Mountains of Madness, I thought those were really cool. I thought it was very cool because if you have read Mountains of Madness, it goes to a certain point, and then the narrator of the story flees in terror, as most Lovecraft narrators flee in terror. Whereas Mountains of Madness, it goes into detail about, because it's not going to assume that you're going to flee in terror. It tells you what is going on beneath Antarctica. And so I thought they did a pretty good job with that. I would run that before Horror on the Orient Express, just because, like I said, it's a very condensed. It all takes place in the same area. Now, it has a weak section. The weak section is to travel back to the United States from the boat. It tries to bring in another plot line. I don't think it does a very good job at all. I think after everything that happens in Antarctica, you probably should end the adventure there, because it's pretty cool. And so they try to hold you got to get back to the States. And so it does the ship trip back, and there's something on the ship hunting people. It's kind of alien, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work in the framework of Call of Cthulhu. But I really think if you spend a lot of time with Mountains of Madness, I think that would be a really good campaign to run. That's another long one. That would probably take you about a year to run it.
So we can't talk about this without mentioning something, which is, I was talking that I didn't think that Chaosium had come out with a campaign that sort of matches Masks. And it's not a criticism of Chaosium. It's just how strong that product was.
Yeah, it is.
But you abso-fucking-lutely ought to look up, if you're going to get Masks, and I always recommend get Masks, just buy it. But the other one I always recommend is Pagan Publishing's Walker in the
Waste. Mm-hmm. Very
Jesus. Good. It took everything about Masks and cranked the creepy meter up to a 12. And if you want to really hit the party with how brutal Ithaca the Windwalker can be, if you want to drop your party into a situation of, pardon the pun, sheer terror, Walker in the Waste is without a doubt. I think if Mass of Nyarlathotep was the greatest RPG campaign ever, Walker's in the top 5. And if Masks was the best RPG campaign that came out of the 80s, Walker is the same thing for the 90s. Really and truly, it's
what's great about Walker also is that it doesn't discourage, nay, it encourages your party to be heavily armed, because it's not going to help a lot. There's parts where you go to different cultist bases where they're all armed with machine guns. So it pretty much look, if you want to bring a mercenary army of 5 characters with machine guns, go right ahead, because they're going to have a giant shootout and everybody's going to be dead. So I thought that was interesting, because most Call of Cthulhu scenarios go into the fact that, look, you can't shoot your way out of this. You have to do this. Walker, there's some things I'm reading there going, you're not going to be able to survive unless you have some badass mercenaries or bodyguards, because there is some nasty crap in here that you're not going to be able to spell away or elder sign away or escape from. It's just going to destroy you. You better have 3 or 4 guys that are cannon fodder, that are going to have machine guns, that are going to be there covering your exits. But it's a brutal campaign too. It is a brutal campaign, but it's really well written. I've read that too. I wanted to run that also, but that is another investment in time that, like I said, that's probably a year campaign, I would think. There's a lot of
I don't know
locations.
about Walker being that long, but
Well, there's a lot of locations to go to. There's like
Yes.
Mass. There's about 5 or 6 locations you have to travel to, but it's really good. It's a really good scenario. I believe is it still out of print? It's really hard to find. You could probably
I think you can get the PDF. I think the PDF.
The books are a ton. You could probably get the book for 120, 150 bucks.
It looks to be about $240 on eBay, $225 on
Yeah,
well, never mind. You might want to get the PDF then. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So really and truly, Walker and the Ways, high recommend. I'm a visceral horror guy, right? I really like a lot of that sort of gut punch. Masks is one of my favorite things I own. I bought it new in 1984. I've treasured that box set. I've read it countless times. I can tell you where I was when I bought Terror Australis. I can tell you the exact moment I bought Terror Australis, just to have that missing piece. And those are the sort of building blocks of our memories of our collective RPG memories.
And that's why I say that that's one of the best campaigns ever run, because to this day, people that were in that campaign with me will bring it up still, and they remember specific events. I can't tell you all the specific events I remember in that campaign. They were just, you're like, holy crap. Like, when they're in the tombs and there's the Egyptian cultist and Billy Bob Thornton or whatever has got his gun, he's just putting bullet after bullet in their skulls, because everybody's like, we're going to die here because they're chasing us and we're dead. We're just dead.
Yep.
And luckily Billy Bob had found a place up top, and he kaboom, head hit, kaboom, critical head hit, kaboom, and they're just like, holy shit, just keep rolling the dice, we may get out of here. And they got out of there because it was just, and they will still remember, like, oh my god, you remember running through the tombs, and we were just running around and we didn't know how to get out, and the one guy's shooting the guy. They remember all that, and that's how you know it's a great campaign, when you can tell stories about that years later. And I have D&D campaigns like that also, where people remember, like, oh my gosh, we were taking on Loth and the spider ship, and then this happened, and our best fighter got bit, and he rolled a 1, didn't say he was dead, and then we're screwed. And so that's when you get something good, is when people have memories of that and can still remember it. And I ran into as a codicil, I ran into the 2 guys who had never played Call of Cthulhu, the way I'd never played role-playing games before. And they remember it years later, that they will still talk about it.
Absolutely.
And the guy that never played role-playing games, he never really got into role-playing games after that. He played a little bit here and there, but he never became a role-playing guy. He was just doing it as something to hang out with his buddy, but he still remembers that. He goes, you remember my Indiana Jones guy? I go, yep, I do. Remember the guy with the whip? And he's like, oh my gosh, and he did this, and he did. I was like, yeah, I remember that. But he still remembers that, 30 years later. That is amazing. 30, 40 years later, that kind of campaign. And I've run D&D campaigns like that also, but just the fact that people know exactly where they were and what this guy was doing, that's one thing that's one reason I love Call of Cthulhu, and I'd love to play it again. But it does require probably a little bit more work than, because when you're running a D&D campaign, you can hand wave a lot of stuff aside because it's a fantasy world. Who knows how they do, whatever happens, it's because magic. The Call of Cthulhu, I had a book, it's called Fads, Fanatics, and something. Anyway, it was a book about the 20s, all the fads, inventions, and famous people that existed from the late teens to the early 40s. And because I would have to go through that, because one character asked me once, were there ballpoint pens back then? Flip through there. There were ballpoint pens in the 20s. I didn't know that. So that's the kind of stuff that if you want to be authentic to the game when you play in the 20s, you need to have those kind of references. Now, we're very lucky. Every one of us now has a computer in our pocket that will tell us all this information. But back when I ran the game in the 80s, I didn't have that. We didn't have a Google. You could just, ball pens yeah, sure. And so that's one thing that makes it a little more difficult to run a Call of Cthulhu game over other games. But the great thing about now is we have Google and we have your phones, and also there's a lot of great movies out there that you can watch, and just absolutely gives you the feel for that time in the 20s and 30s. And that's one of the things I would also ask people, or I would also tell people that were running this adventure, I would say, watch these 5 or 6 movies and you will get the absolute feel. And I don't know, have either of you seen the Cthulhu Society's movies? They had the silent movie called Cthulhu, and then they had the other one based on Whisper in Darkness. And it's the Cthulhu Society. And these movies are made, they're exactly like the stories told, and they have a great, great feel for the actual stories. And so, if you haven't seen these, one was made, the same society made both of them. They have the same actors in both of them. One is what if Call of Cthulhu was made as a silent movie in the 20s, and they do it, and they do an excellent job. And then they do Whisper in Darkness, and they use all kinds of effects you would have used back in the, if you made these movies in the 20s or 30s, and they do an incredible job. And that's the kind of thing I would have people watch if they wanted to run an adventure like this, because they are very authentic to the feel of the actual Cthulhu or the actual Lovecraft stories. I find that most modern Lovecraft remakes, just they're missing. They're just
well. I think we already know what the deep ones are doing with the humans. We don't need to see
do we need to see it?
We don't need to see it, right? And so there's a very famous comic book. What's his name? The Alan Moore. Alan Moore did a X-rated comic book where it explored Nyarlathotep and an avatar of Nyarlathotep. And a woman who was an FBI agent got, she and another guy were trying to investigate a cult, and her partner gets killed, and she is trapped in a dungeon with a deep one and shenanigans. And I already know this stuff is out there. I don't need to see it. And it was unrelenting. And this is the sort of thing where we go from surreal horror to beyond titillation to almost it's almost a bridge too far. Now I'm sure Venger or other people would be all over this and say,
I read that book. I read that. I bought the collected graphic novel last year. I think it's called. Is it called Necronomicon? I can't remember.
It's like Neonomicon.
Neonomicon. Yeah, I read it. I mean, look, it's obvious that Alan Moore has a lot of knowledge and respect and loves the Cthulhu mythos. But yes,
dude.
Yeah. Do you really need to go that far? It went way far.
Yes. Yes. I already know what's going on with the deep one and the human.
Yeah, we don't need to. Yeah, but that's Alan Moore.
I don't need brutal like Lee Child detail levels. And
no, it went way over the top. But it's really, if you are a Lovecraft fan, it's a good series because it has a lot of deep cuts, so to speak. It really he has an entire. If you go online, there's an entire reference library where you can, every issue tells you this is what books this is from, this is this character, he's from this short story. And
it's a bit like the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, right? Yeah. Every page has 20 references. How well read are you? And it's a tough slog if you're not, if you're not deep in the background material, you miss a lot of the jokes, but gosh, there's some great jokes.
So Eric put up the that's the link to the Whisper in Darkness film that the Cthulhu Society put up, and there's also a Call Cthulhu one too. I like them because, like I said, they were made as if you made them during that time, so it doesn't get too over the top. Well, like Whisper in Darkness with the heads in the jars comes off more as a crazy kind of sci-fi movie, the way they did it, because it's it's not done for gore purposes or like that. And I find a lot of the modern Lovecraft, they try to go too deep into the gore. Like, but if you read Lovecraft, he didn't focus on that. As a matter of fact, that's not what he would have been interested in. He was not interested in the gore aspect. He was interested in the horror of the cosmic horror of it. And when you stuff like the modern remake of From Beyond and stuff like that, or even
like Reanimator.
Reanimator. It's over the top, but it's just, that's not stuff he would have ever put in his books. And people, I think, nowadays get this really weird view. My wife, just from movies, thinks that Lovecraft was a lunatic just because she's only seen the movies that were made from Hollywood, where it's just over the top. She's like, how did he get away with that in the 20s? I said, he didn't, because that's not in the book. He did not get away with that in the 20s because that didn't happen. That they did a remake of Dreams in the Witch House a few years back. It is gore from start to finish, over the top gore, and so I would just say to most people that if you are interested in Lovecraft, read the original Lovecraft. Don't read the modern stuff first. I mean, you might get into that later. And I think that, matter of fact, going back to our gaming topic, Call of Cthulhu, the best Call of Cthulhu scenarios and campaigns are ones that hew closely to Lovecraft's vision of cosmic horror. Of you're just a little ant and you have very little chance to change anything. The most you can do is change something. You can't defeat the elder gods. It's impossible. You cannot defeat them. You're not going to take a shotgun and kill Cthulhu. But if you're smart and think about it, you can delay his plans or ruin his plans. And those are the best Call of Cthulhu scenarios. The ones where you really have a very little chance of succeeding, but if you're smart enough, you can succeed. And I think that's why people love Call of Cthulhu too.
Yeah, and I think the idea is that you don't expect your character to survive, but you expect your character to make a difference.
Right. And that's actually a really good way of putting it, Jim. Right. Because you're right. You're not going to quote unquote win, are you? You're not going to win. Woo, we won. We killed Shub-Niggurath. He's dead. Oh no, that's not going to happen.
Survive, right?
You killed the
other is, I think our entry point on fantasy and science fiction and multiplanar travel and so on and so forth is so much broader than what 1920s, 30s, 40s science fiction and fantasy and horror was about. And if anything, I think we've regressed in some ways, because now horror is very centered on the individual and not the larger monsters and so on and so forth. It's about Jason. It's about things like that, and that's fine. There's an audience for that, and that's great. But existential dread, which is what creeps in at you over a Call of Cthulhu game, is really the thing that should power it, right? That you are mortal and you are frail, and you can be snuffed out the way you step on an ant, and you don't even know that you stepped on an ant. But with enough forbearance, with enough gumption, whatever the words are that you want to use, you can't stop the tide, but you might turn the tide. If that makes sense.
Makes sense.
Sorry.
Yes, now you know what? I'm all jazzed up to play Call of Cthulhu, Jim. Screw you, Jim. I hate you.
Sure. I love you too.
I have no time. I have no time for a Call of Cthulhu campaign. Oh, I'd love to do one though. Now, and that's another thing too. Let's talk about the depth of material for Call of Cthulhu. There's been 40 years of material, and it's all good, and it's all interchangeable with any edition of Call of Cthulhu. I mean, you could you can easily run it. 7th edition, 6th edition, 5th, whatever. Now switching from an old edition to 7th is different because 7th changed up the way statistics are done for the characters. But yeah, it's there's some really classic scenarios. There's a great scenario, and I don't remember the name of it, where your characters go to the moon, and it's really good. It's one of, probably I consider one of the best scenarios of all time. And I can't remember the name of it. But you find a gate to the moon, and your characters can go through using a deep sea diving helmet and a tube. And there's some startling, horrific revelations you find on the moon crater you go to on the dark side of the moon. And so there's just some really good, that they go all the way from something like that to just like a simple story where you're, in the backwoods and there's somebody worshiping, trees in the back, in the swamp. I mean, there's all kinds of breadth of material.
And I guess what I would say is the good thing about the X-Files TV show was that it had an overarching conspiracy. The problem with the X-Files was that it got bogged down in the conspiracy, and at the same time, the other flip of the X-Files was Monster of the Week.
Yeah.
And the problem is that the conspiracy went too long with. I mean, if you were out of the loop for 2 or 3 episodes, Jesus, trying to get back in was a slog. and the monsters of the week ran the gamut of horrific to silly and just dumb. And there were good episodes, right? Like the inbred family that was in season 5.
Oh, horrific episode! Oh, it's terrible.
Right, that was only included in the syndication
It
after
was
years of it being
banned.
excluded.
It was banned off TV. It's so
And
bad.
and you don't remember how bad it was until you watch it again, because most people, everybody remembers it, but nobody really remembers it. But when you watch it, you're horrified, right? You can't believe this ever aired on a Sunday night on Fox.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh wait, it was Fox. Yeah, that absolutely aired on Sunday. But it was a show that, like a Call of Cthulhu campaign, yes, there's the overall campaign against the dark gods and their minions and so on and so forth, which is the grand conspiracy. But then the problem you have to make sure you avoid with Call of Cthulhu is that it doesn't become monster of the week.
Mhm.
You know, the great race of Yith. You should not, characters as a whole should never encounter one of the great race. Shoggoths are not easily defeated and should be like, the worst version of the Horta from Star Trek, right? That this thing just jumps on people and they die. There's so much of this stuff that you just have to be careful to not become cliche about.
And then look, you can carry that over to a D&D campaign, because I know when I was running games when I first started out in the late 70s and early 80s, I absolutely got sucked into Monster of the Week, because there's all these cool monsters in the monster manual, and I want my character to fight a wyvern, I want him to fight a Medusa, I want him to fight a stone giant. And so yes, every week the character, we played back in the day, they were fighting, one of the cool monsters I pulled out of the back. And then I realized it was just because, like you said, it was becoming Monster of the Week. We fought manticores this week. Last week we fought, the wyverns were threatening the city. Then it was the manticores. Then it was the troglodytes.
But John Miller asked a great question, and I have a take on this. Maybe you guys will disagree. What's it like to run a long-run COC campaign? Do all the PCs go insane and become unplayable? So here's really the three things. Your PC character, your player character, has one of three fates. Number one, they die. And humans are weak flesh bags, and they might as well have a Major Matt Mason or Evil Knievel wire structure interior, because when the monsters come to play, the meat bags don't stand much of a chance. So they either die or they go insane. And the insanity can manifest itself in a lot of different ways. But truthfully, when you hit zero, the keeper, the person running the game, should just take the sheets from you, because now they're going to become NPCs. And they can be NPCs that are brutish, or they can be locked up in a nut house. But I always found that good player characters can come into being as truly malevolent, insane NPCs, right? Because once you've cooked off all the inhibitions, once you've cooked off all the things that hold them back, they can become NPCs of terrifying capability. And then finally, if they survive, if they don't die, if they don't become insane, and they level up to a certain point, you as a player have to sort of decide, right? There is the wise professor who spent his years in digs throughout South America and so on. You can play a character for so long that eventually what you sort of have to do, it's like a high-level D&D campaign. You weep like Alexander because you have no more fields, you have no more conquests before you, and you have to sort of willingly engage to let that character become an NPC that you control, or that the keeper lets you control it, so that they're a resource for the next crop of players. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, that's what. So the mask character, my youngest brother ran. I told you his name was Henry Jones. He read all the books, and after Masks, he retired, because my brother said, "Look, he lived through Masks. He's done it. But he was their resource after that. If they ever wanted to know what was in the Necronomicon or the Eber of Labonis or whatever, they would go to the retired Henry Jones, who was now a reclusive professor who had a library. He kept the books. He was the guy that kept them all. Now his sanity was only about 40 at that point because he had seen a lot of bad stuff. But yeah, to my brother, that was the perfect end for his character. He retired. He's the resource you go to now. And I had other players that retired their characters because they said that a couple of them said the same thing. After Masks, everything else was just. I ran a couple of adventures after that. They're like, oh wow, we're killing a bunch of crazy hillbillies in the mountains. Well, it's boy, last year we were destroying cultists in a volcano in China. This is a letdown. And they were just like, let's just retire these characters and move on and get a whole new crop of characters. Because Jim's right. It becomes like a high-level D&D character. After a while, you're like, okay, you got your castle. You can kill dragons with 3 blows. I mean, what is there to do? There's not much to do.
Well, and that's just it, right? That no matter how high your character gets in Call of Cthulhu, you're never going to beat Cthulhu. It isn't going to happen. Right?
And by the way, a bullet hits you in the head, you're going to die if you've been on 50 adventures or 1 adventure.
And I always used to play Nyarlathotep. The best you could hope for with Nyarlathotep was that he was bemused, right? That if you managed to thwart his efforts, he laughed. Because there were 999 other incarnations of Nyarlathotep that were working on plots around the world that you had no idea about. And that was the best the players could hope for. And there is an encounter with Nyarlathotep in the Mass of Nyarlathotep. There's a horrific, terrifying encounter with Nyarlathotep. And again, what is your aim in playing Call of Cthulhu as a player? Are you trying to get some character at some theoretical max level? Because that's probably not going to happen, and you're setting yourself up for disappointment. I think you approach Call of Cthulhu the same way you approach every other role-playing game. We're going to go into a collaborative storytelling mode, and we're going to try to craft some stories that we'll be retelling for the next 30 or 40 years. This one time at Nyarlathotep camp, blah, blah, blah. And I think you have to have a grounding about that, because when you do, I think it's better. And that's a good place to end. I think that's a good start.
And I would say if you're going to play it, that's you have your core group of characters, but the best thing to do is hire muscle. Hire muscle. Look, muscle's easy to find in the 20s. You get them. You get guys that are World War I veterans, or you get gangsters, or you get, underbelly of society people. And that's who you go fight the Dagon cultists, while you and your smart guys are looking through the books and trying to figure out how to get rid of the summoning. Because that's the way you survive multiple adventures.
Yes. And understand that no matter Western concepts, life is kind of cheap. And money will get you bearers. And nobody remembers the bearers' names after the monsters ate the bearers while you were.
Yeah, the Great Depression. It was easy to hire people. Or at least my characters found it easy to hire people for $2, $5 a day, or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, that was our Call of Cthulhu episode of Talking Crit for this year. So, because Jim and I are we love Call of Cthulhu. So we got off on the tangent, but
it was fine. So, real quick housekeeping. Zach has been is one of is the patron right now of the live streams as a member. So thank you, Zach. I asked him if he wanted to say anything for Frog God Game, and he said,
"Oh, Zach, I thought you meant Zach Smith. I'm sorry."
He said, "Go fuck Frog God." This is me.
Oh, you mean Zach Glazer? Okay.
Yeah. So Zach Glazer,
different guy.
Zach Glazer is our patron.
Not
a patron saint. If you know Zach, he's not a patron saint. But in any case. Live stream tomorrow.
Sorry,
yes. Live stream tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Friday, Glenn and I have the Gangbuster special. Mark Hunt will be our guest
Mark,
Friday night.
Awesome.
And of course, Saturday is Gamers Health.
So here's a homework assignment for people. Go watch the original King Kong, Like, try to
Ooh.
find a copy of King Kong on something streaming or otherwise. Go watch the original King Kong and find out how many characters that don't have a proper name you care about. And I say that because even if you watch, like, I think it's on Amazon Prime, I think the 1977 remake of King Kong or whatever it was, there are characters from the ship that die during the course of the exploration of Skull Island. And yeah, they're sort of cliched characters and so on, but go watch either of those versions of King Kong, and that should be a bit of like what a Call of Cthulhu adventure should be like, right? That you should have a cast of, we need somebody to row the boat, and we need a couple of guys carrying stuff, and blah blah blah. So sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I like that.
But if you watch the original King Kong, that really will help you get in the flavor of what a Call of Cthulhu adventure should be like. And the other is the second Mummy movie with Brandon Fraser. That is a spec. The first 2/3 of that movie are a Call of Cthulhu game put into a script.
Jim, we got to see that in the big screen last year. They had one of those retro movie nights at the local theater. We brought the grandkids. It was glorious.
Yes.
Glorious. The
hands down, strong recommendation.
Yes.
Kong Thulu and Mummy 2 Thulu, and you'll be set. Yeah.
Folks, thank you so much. Hey, listen, this group will be back next Wednesday. Next week, the live streams may be a little wacky because I'll be in Michigan. I'll be driving. So there's going to be shenanigans as I go to WizardCon. Be safe, be well, God bless. Roll those dice, roll them well. Catch you all.